Hi, I'm Dan Stair of Daniel's Training Services, and I provide consulting and training services on the management of waste and on the transportation of hazardous materials. There's going to be a link to my video or to my website at the end of this video and in the description to the video as well. So there'll be ways you can get a hold of me if you have any questions. What I'm going to be talking about here today is a particular requirement of the regulations when transporting a hazardous material as a limited quantity. So when you're out in the world, when you're around businesses and that sort of thing, there are going to be hazardous materials, and those hazardous materials have to be transported. And when they're transported, they're subject to certain regulations. And with a little bit of knowledge, you can look for those regulations, look for their use in the transportation of hazardous materials, and make sure that what you ship and what others ship is in compliance with the regs. So again, the purpose of this video is to point out where I believe I've found a potential violation of the hazardous materials regulations of the USDOT. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. Now, first off, I mentioned a limited quantity exception, and this everything we're going to talk about here today is related to the requirements of the limited quantity exception. Well, what is that? Well, in a different video, I had a whole explanation of the limited quantity exception. I'm not going to go through that here. What I will say is this: the limited quantity exception is a packaging exception from the full regulations of the DOT. And by a packaging exception, what that means is that the exception itself is based on the packaging that you use and the quantities in the packaging. So, to take advantage of the limited quantity exception, number one, it's got to be a certain kind of hazardous material of a certain degree of danger, and that will determine the size of your inner packaging. So the size of your inner receptacles in a combination packaging will be determined by what the hazardous material is and what its degree of danger is. In addition to that, there will also be a gross package weight. So I'm going to pick up the empty one here. So this is an empty box used for a limited quantity, but when it's full with the hazardous material and everything else, the gross package weight cannot exceed 30 kilograms. So you have two different limits when you're taking advantage of the limited quantity exception. And there's more requirements that go along with it, which we're going to talk about. Now, if you can ship something as a limited quantity, you can get a pretty significant break from the full regulation. So for example, you don't need shipping papers to accompany the hazardous material when it's in transportation. You don't need hazmat labels on the package. You don't need placards on the truck that transports the hazardous material. You don't need specification packaging, so that can be very big. This is not specification packaging. This is just a plain old cardboard box, which does not cost nearly as much as specification packaging might cost. If you ship something as a limited quantity, this type of packaging would be sufficient. And there are a few, not many, but there's only a few package markings required on your package of a limited quantity. And that's where I believe I found a potential violation on one of these two up here in front of me. Okay, so what are the package marking requirements? And really, I'm going to tip my hand here. This is the package that is in compliance. This is the one that I believe is out of compliance. I found both of these just at gas stations across the country. These are on display out in the front of gas stations and at hardware stores in various places. And it is basically a windshield washer fluid shipped as a limited quantity. So this one here, as I noted, is done correctly. Okay, so this is for a windshield wash fluid. It's shipped as a limited quantity, so it's got the limited quantity diamond marking there. That's required. It only needs to be on one side, and they did that. Okay. The other requirement when shipping a limited quantity, if inside you have liquid packaging, and we would here, right? This would be in here. So when your combination packaging has inner receptacles that contain liquids, Then, in addition to the limited quantity marking, you must also have this, the orientation arrows, and they must be on two opposing sides. So you see how this shipper did that. In addition to the limited quantity exception, because there's liquid packagings in there, they have the orientation arrows on two opposing sides. What's lacking here on this one are those orientation arrows, okay? So if I flip this around, here we've got the diamond, they've got the limited quantity diamond, that's great. It only appears on one side, okay? But you notice nowhere on this package do you see the orientation arrows, and we do have inner liquid packagings in here. So this package should be displaying orientation arrows on two opposing sides, and it does not. So that is a violation of the regulations, and this is something that is in plain view for everybody to see. This was all, there's a big stack of these up in front of a gas station. So this is the kind of thing, mistakes that people make, that if it was detected in transportation, this could be a violation of the regulations, and it could cost the shipper quite a lot of money. So that's why I marked out their name here. I'm not trying to get anybody in any trouble here, but if you know this is yours, you might want to take care of that. What's the big deal here? Well, again, it all comes down to money. The limited quantity exception, if you can take advantage of it, is a great way to save yourself money on shipping costs and packaging and all sorts of things like that. But the flip side of it is that you have to do it right, because if you make a mistake, even a simple mistake, like not having orientation arrows on the box, then you could have a fine and you could have a violation, and the distribution of your product could be held up, and you might have to go back and put these markings on all these packages before you can ship them anymore, and who knows how much that's going to cost. So you want to make sure that you do this right. Small little mistakes can have significant costs for you and your business. And that's where I come in. I can answer your questions. I can point you to the regulations that help you to avoid simple violations like this. And I can provide the training that's required for any employees who work with or around these hazardous materials when they're in transportation. So that's the loading and unloading, the packaging, all sorts of things like that. There is a training requirement. It's called hazmat employee training, and I do that hazmat employee training, and I can help you out with that. And even if you don't need training, but you have some questions, by all means, please give me a call, contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.